Okay, here I go. Welcome to the Pillow Cube podcast. I'm Will Beck. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Morgan has a PhD in psychology. She's a blogger, therapist, and relationship expert. Morgan, thanks for coming and joining us on the Pillow Talk podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, relationship expert. How is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like a self given title, right? Like, sure, I'm an expert. No, I've studied relationships technically throughout my educational experience for a very long time. If anyone's done higher education, you have tons and tons of projects that you do, papers you do, thesis, dissertations, and all of those have been around the study of relationships. And also, this isn't something I talk about a ton on my Instagram, which is probably problematic, but I work with my dad, and he has a PhD in psychology as well, and he's been in the field of relationships. I don't even know. I'd have to really think about it. Over 30 years. He started developing courses before those were like the things that everybody.
It's the thing right now. Everybody needs
like
a course.
The thing. He had courses before they were cool, and they were all relationship courses. He started with a course for singles. He has a book called How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk, and would speak.
I'm glad that my wife never found that book.
That's what everyone says, right? They're like, what if it's too late? But he started creating courses and teaching them back when I was in elementary school. And around middle school, I started going with him to conferences, relationship conferences. I started speaking with him at conferences. And so I feel like I can say I'm a relationship expert for a couple of reasons. One, I grew up in the field of relationships. There's a lot of sort of like key names. I've been around them. I've heard them speak. I've spoken at these conferences. And then I've studied relationships for the better part of my life, like half of my life. I feel like, throughout my educational experience and just my real life and world experience working alongside my dad.
So the real test, I think, would be is if we pulled your husband on, would he be like, yeah, she's a relationship expert?
It's so funny you say that. So we tend to kind of like end up with somebody who compliments us in the ways that we need. So I'm like really analytical. I'm like, let's talk. Like I'm long-winded, which you're probably realizing. And I want to talk about everything and analyze it. And I ended up with a guy who I've known him forever. We met when I was 14, but he is like a man of few words.
Yeah.
He can like only handle so much, right? So it's like it's forced him to kind of stretch and tolerate a little bit more conversation, and me to sort of learn when it's time to stop. But I feel like for the early years in our relationship, I sort of had to convince him that I wasn't trying to like use my therapy wizarding skills.
Yes.
Like do something subliminal to him or something.
I know what you're doing to me. I've seen your posts.
I know. Like, no, we're just talking. Like I'm not trying to be a therapist in this moment. I'm just sitting with you as your wife having a conversation. So I think, yeah, he would give me credit now, but I think early on he was kind of resistant to it.
So when you're chatting, is it you talking and he's just kind of like listening, or is he get chatty? Or
he gets chatty? I've learned, and I think this goes, and I'm going to kind of paint with a broad brush here, men, women, but something that I've learned about my husband is he needs a little bit more time to open up. He needs a little bit more space, and women tend to talk in a way where we kind of just like interrupt each other a lot. And so he'll open up, but I noticed in myself that I would jump in because I'd get excited to talk to him. I'd jump in, I'd interrupt him, and then suddenly I'd taken over the conversation. So I've learned to just sit and listen and be quiet and give him a little bit more time. And then he's off. Then he's talking and he's opening up and things like that. So giving it a bit more space.
It's hard for the excited conversationalists who want to be like chat. And then to the people who are a little more bashful, like sit back unless you let them,
Yes. And I think that's just something that people need to learn to do sometimes if they're with a partner like that. Give them the space, give them the time to get into their groove.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things you mentioned to me before the podcast is that your husband stole your pillow cube. Was that like a source of any kind of relationship trauma or?
No, he's so generous with me that I was happy, but it kind of went like this. Hey, I got this pillow called the Pillow Cube for side sleepers. Like, do you want to check it out? He's like, yeah, I'll try it. And I have never seen it again.
Yeah, it was over.
It was over. Yeah, he loves it. He totally does. And I'm happy for him to have it because he is like the most amazing sleep hygienist. Like he is just so good about getting good sleep, the right amount of sleep. And if the pillow helps him, I'm happy for him to have it.
So how are you about getting the right amount of sleep?
It's a work in progress. He's helped me be a better sleeper. I know the importance of it. I know it's like one of the most important things we can do for our overall health and like every domain, like emotional, physical, mental, relational. But I think that I don't know who your listeners are. If you have moms who are listening, a really common thing is that we stay up late to get alone time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really guilty of that.
I know my wife listens and she's a mom, so we at least have that. That's the only confirmed.
So maybe she's like nodding her head right now.
Yeah, she's like, oh yeah, totally. I got to be careful
that
when I talk about her, but yeah. Yeah. How do you change when you don't get enough sleep?
I mean, I think of sleep as sort of like closing the loop on our overall well-being.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you don't get good sleep, you don't close that loop and you're going to have all sorts of issues. It is like it's like the missing link, right? So if you don't get enough sleep, oh my gosh, physically it messes with you. I mean, sleep is where we repair. Our body repairs. It's where we heal. If you've exercised that day, sleep is kind of when your body heals so you can get stronger. It affects our emotional well-being. When we don't get enough sleep, we tend to have, we're like more reactive to things. Our emotional sensitivity is heightened. I know there was a study where peers rated each other in the workplace on emotional intelligence, and those who got less sleep or inadequate sleep were rated as having a lower emotional intelligence. It affects our relationships. I think that any couple who's in the sort of like newborn phase, when they are just not getting enough sleep, you're just a little bit more on edge, you're a little bit more irritable, you're more reactive. And so research shows that to be true even in our relationship. So I think we can go on and on and on. Sleep is really, really important.
Yeah, I know I tend to lose my patience a little bit. And then there's the things that I need to do for my relationship where it's like my natural instinct is to say this. And then what I should say is this. And when I have sleep, I can kind of go with this is what I should do. But when I don't have sleep, I kind of go with this is what I naturally feel like doing, and I just have a harder time resisting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a technical term for that. It's emotional regulation, right? Like our ability to sort of slow down in a moment and say, okay, I'm going to choose like the best response for my relationship. And I'm going to kind of keep calm, or I'm going to not spout off that thing that we sometimes want to say, right? So it's true. I mean, sleep affects our ability to regulate better.
Yeah. Look at me. I'm like a doctor now.
I know, right? You got this. Now you are a relationship expert.
Yeah. I'm emotionally regulating. So, do you dream a lot when you sleep?
It's a good question. Lately I have been, and if you're going to ask me why, I really don't know. I mean, I guess technically, don't we always dream? I'm not an expert on this.
So
but
the dreaming happens mostly during the REM state. And so I think you do kind of always dream if you're getting like quality REM sleep, but that is the sleep that happens in the later stages. And so if you're not sleeping enough, you're going to dream less for sure,
Yeah. And then sometimes you don't even remember them really.
Yeah. And I think remembering happens like it's a conscious thing. Like since I've been more focused on sleep, I've been remembering my dreams pretty much every night. And I try to write little things down, or like I do want to know what I'm dreaming about and thinking about. And it's just weird. I like it. Like I went to prom 2 nights ago.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, like
I
in
feel
my
like there's a
dream.
story there. Oh, in
No.
your I'm like, wait, hold on.
I went to prom as like a 38-year-old. I was like, this is weird.
Oh, and you were 38.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was in high school. It was like I'm 38,
Interesting.
but like, well, I was who I am now. It wasn't like a high school version of myself, but I was in high school. I don't know.
Did
It was a weird dream.
so I have all the like now I have all these questions. I'm not a dream
Go for it.
analyst,
Go
but now
for
I'm
it.
curious. Okay, so like did you feel how did you feel being at prom as a 38-year-old?
Uncomfortable a little bit, you know.
Did you have a date?
I did, but like the date wasn't ever pictured. It was like,
It was like assumed.
yeah, it wasn't like there was like a specific person, and I was like, this is awkward. I
And
was like, I
like,
don't know if I'm supposed to be here.
did anybody else recognize that you were a 38-year-old at prom, or was it just
No,
you and
it
your
seems
own?
pretty normal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So how do you understand your dream? What do you make
I
of it?
have no idea. I don't put a lot of credence into it. Um, yeah. So that happened. I had a dream last night. Kind of a weirder one too. I was at school and they announced that there was a shooting at our school.
Oh,
Yeah, another bad one.
you're having anxiety. This is like, so I feel like dreams. I'm not like, I would never say I'm good at analyzing dreams. So I'm not going to I'm not gonna say I'm a dream expert as we're
Yeah.
sitting here, but I mean, dreams are really so interesting because I mean, it's a lot of us. I mean, this is you're like, what happens when you're sleeping? I mean, part of it is like we are kind of like integrating information in our lives and what's going on. And there's all these subconscious experiences that we have through the day, or even just like um residing right below our consciousness. So whether that's like a kind of an undercurrent of anxiety or worry or something on the horizon that you're kind of feeling nervous about. And I feel like a lot of times these get sort of worked out
Mm-hmm.
through our dreams. So they can be sources of insight if if you're writing them down to kind of look at them and look at themes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'll
But
try to
that sounds
deal
like
with my anxiety.
sounds like anxiety. I don't know. It
I'm
sounds
like
like
the
it does.
least anxious person I know. I just like everyone's like stressed about this or that, and I'm just like, well, life's gonna work out, you know. Like, well, it's not worth worrying about. And so like I'm not super anxious, but yeah. I do have, and this is like I have a school shooting dream probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Weird thing about me, I went to Columbine High School, so I was there when that happened.
Okay, well, there's a little bit of information.
Yeah, there's some insight that like changes that.
That's
But
important.
last night happened to be like one of those nightmare dreams. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It is
So.
so stressful. Ugh.
Yep. So tell me a little bit like why you wanted to. I know your dad was in this field, but like it seems like you have more than just like, oh, this is my job. It's more like a mission of like what you're trying to do. Like what is your purpose for being in your field?
It's funny, but I don't know if I've really been asked that before.
New answer then. It's exciting.
I know, right? Now I'm like, okay, now it has to make it good.
Nothing has to be good here. We can mess up on this podcast, and
This
there's
is
like
mediocre.
Yeah, this is like we just want what you think. Go for it.
I think early on, it was about just the idea of being in the field of psychology. I really liked problem solving, which is not necessarily like a really heart-centered motivation. But I played this game when I was little with my dad. So he went back to school when I was like in 3rd or 4th grade. And so sometimes I'd go to class with him and we would play this game on the way where he would give me like a case study and he would ask, what are you going to do? What would you do to help this family? What interventions would you do? And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the critical thinking piece and the problem solving. I think as I kind of matured more in knowing what I wanted to do and in being in the field, I think it's like multifaceted. Like one experience is that I worked in a college counseling center with college students I did this for a number of years. And man, like people are really lost when it comes to relationships. And it struck me in such a massive way when I was working with that population, particularly because there's like conversations they had never even had. Like, what do you value about a relationship? What are you looking for? I mean, it was a lot of this mentality of, it is what it is, or if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And it's like this passivity in relationships just really hit me hard. And I'm a firm believer that we have to be active managers of our relationships. And so I felt like there's just a big need.
Mm-hmm.
I think too is relationships are woven into every aspect of our life. I mean, who you choose to be with is like one of the most important decisions you
It is
make.
the most important decision. I think
Yes.
it's every day that person that like has the most time, of your whole life for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
and you're most vulnerable to them too. So if they want to get you, they can get you and just totally cut you.
It's such a vulnerable experience, right?
Yep.
Like being in a relationship and sharing your life. And so I feel like I have a particular skill set at um taking like a theory or research and actually making it like palatable and practical. And so I just really enjoy it. Like I enjoy if I can take something that feels really complicated or mysterious about relationships and translate that into something that somebody's like, "Oh, I get that and I can do that." Then I
Mhm.
feel like I'm doing something good in the world.
Yeah, I totally identify with what you say about problem solving. Most people don't look at their relationships as like, how do I repair this? How do I fix this? How do I make this better? They're just like react, react,
Yeah.
react, react. And it's just like somebody does something, then I do this. Somebody does it. And it doesn't seem very calculated to me. And one of the things I try to talk about my kids, and I've always had this theory about like people that are like, there's people that maybe you don't like. And it's like, how can I treat that person in a way to, I wouldn't say maximize their value or whatever to you, but just to like get the most out of them, out of that
Mhm.
relationship. And it's like, just in the way that you deal with people, like you can think about it. And it's like, hey, this person can be valuable to me. Like, let me just be kind to them and like get it. In a relationship with my wife, it's like, hey, I want to say this, but if I treat her this way, like she's going to be happier and then she'll be nicer back to me, and
Totally.
um Dr. Laura, she I have not read a ton of her stuff,
Mhm.
but she just has some theories about like, or that where I've read a little bit where it's like, if you do this, somebody's behavior is going to change to you and somebody has to like start that pattern of being kind. She
Yes.
probably puts too much of that on women having to do that only,
Which
but
is a bit, yeah, that's a bit touchy these days.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it's true. I'm not sure. I'm not the expert, but I do feel like people in a relationship, somebody's got to be like, hey, I'm gonna make this change.
Totally. I 1000% agree. I feel like I push that a lot, like in my in stuff that I do, whether it's like a
Hmm.
podcast interview or on Instagram or things like that, which is, I mean, there's a relationship is a dynamic, so it feeds off of each other, but then also a relationship is the coming together of two people who have their individual differences, which encompass all sorts of things, right? Your physiology, your perspective, taking how you view the world, your early growing up experiences. And so we all come in with these different perspectives. And so I think that like as you approach relationship issues, one is like you try to work on the dynamic, but the other is, and this happens a lot, especially women will say like my partner's not going to do anything, but if an individual in the relationship makes changes, inevitably you're going to change the dynamic, right? It's going
Hmm.
to affect things. There's this sort of like um if I'm going to flick over this domino, it's going to hit all of the others. And so I think as individuals, we have a lot of agency to make changes in our relationships as an individual, even if the other person doesn't do anything, because once we start changing, it's going to change the dynamic. So what you're telling your kids is really true. Maybe this person isn't that great to you, but if you start changing the way you approach it, something is going to shift. Maybe it's
Hmm.
not perfect, right? Sometimes we don't need to be friends with everybody, but um, we should treat people in a particular way and it makes a difference.
People react to kindness,
They do.
it like changes who they are naturally. And so if like you show kindness to somebody, it's very difficult for them to be really mean back. There's special people out there who can do it.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. I know. It's funny. I'm just like thinking right now, our daughter came home from basketball last night and she's like, so and so was really mean to me. And I'm
Hmm.
like, what? happened, and it was so silly. It was just something like she asked for her spot back in line, and this girl was like, no. And it's not even she's in third grade. Okay. So it's not real crazy, but even just having that conversation with her about like, well, how could you choose to react? And so kindness is one. I also think humor, like it's really hard to be mad at somebody when they say something funny or
Oh,
they
you
make you
should talk to my
laugh.
wife. She gets pretty mad at me sometimes when I guess I
Okay.
think I'm being funny.
See, it's
Maybe.
just perception there.
Yeah. So first off, your daughter, how good of a basketball player is she?
Well, she's
She-
not good. I mean,
Is
she's
she
new. This is her first year.
okay? Are you
The
guys into
first year.
basketball? Are you guys basketball players?
Yeah, I played for a bit. It wasn't my main sport. My husband played for a
Okay.
while, for a long time. He's good. Yeah.
I love basketball so much.
Yeah, I do
So
love basketball.
anytime people bring it up, I'm like, I got to take a big tangent here and
That's
dive into
fine.
this.
I mean, so we're from Ohio originally. I don't know if you know that. And so we lived there when LeBron was there and had season tickets. So I don't know how you feel about him now. I don't know how I feel about him.
Well, I mean, I have so much respect for LeBron in a lot of different areas, and I always root against him. That's like
right?
Like my principle of life is like, well, oh, LeBron's playing, I'm rooting for whoever else is playing.
That's hilarious.
But I look at him in the way he's like grown up, and he's in a family where he didn't have a dad that was active, and like see him being a family man and being a good dad and avoiding controversy and like doing all these scholarships for all these underprivileged youth. Like I look at what he's done, I'm like, wow, he's come from such a tough background and done so much. So I have like huge respect for a lot of the things he's doing. I just,
100%
like rooting against him. And I think Michael Jordan's the best player ever. And if he wants to come for that, then I'll just,
But his basketball intelligence is so good.
Oh, he's
just
incredible.
So fun to watch. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have a daughter. She's 14.
Okay. How many kids do you have total?
I have 3. So 14, 12, and 10. I've got a son that's 12, a daughter that's 10. Okay. My 14-year-old, she's getting close to that like dating world,
Yeah. And I met my husband when I was 14.
Oh,
so if that doesn't freak you out.
Even more uncomfortable for me, So I'm thinking my worst case scenario in life is that I like work really hard to raise my daughter up and teach her all these things that are really important to me and help her become a great human being. And then she finds a not great human being to be with for the rest of her life.
So I feel like you couldn't have teed that up any better, because that's what my dad's book is about. So you should get it, and you can get it on Amazon or something, and you should read it, and she should read it. But I think that, it's funny because we teach our kids so much about how to be a good person, right? How to be kind, how to be forgiving, how to be nice and manners and all these things. But something where we don't like always put enough effort is how to teach them or to teach them how to choose a good person, how to use discernment in their relationships. And I think it's a little bit tricky these days because we kind of have a culture now where anything judgment related is kind of bad. Like we want to be anything but judgmental. Like,
I'm willing to boycott I'm like, you got to make judgments that are best for your life, like we're all doing whatever is like to make us happy, and we want to be kind and respectful of other people. But when it comes to choosing a partner, you don't choose a partner to help somebody else.
No, but people sometimes do. And here's the thing is like we raise our kids to be good people, but good people tend to give a lot of chances. They tend to see the best. They project their goodness onto others. And so we also have to balance that out by teaching discernment. So it's a good time to be doing that with your daughter. It's a good time. I mean, I've been doing it with our daughter since preschool when we started having girls are crazy with one another sometimes, but they're just can be so unkind at a young age. And so we had real early conversations about how do we choose friends? Obviously, you're always kind to people, but how do we choose who you want to invest your time in? And so teaching the skills of discernment is a big one for you and your wife, right?
Can I give you my NBA draft analogy?
Yeah, do it.
I mean, you're building a family, right? It's like a team, but you get one draft pick to choose your partner, right? And you're going to evaluate and look for like all the best characteristics. And you don't choose a partner. You're like, well, I want to help that person out. No. NBA teams are not here to help somebody out. They're like, who is going to be the savior of our franchise for the next 20 years. But this is for life. You're committed to this person. You got to choose the absolute best number one draft pick, and I'm just like, that's what it needs to be.
I love that. Can I use that sometime?
You can absolutely use it. I don't even need any credit.
I'll give you credit.
But I tell my wife, like, that's why I chose you. Like the things that, and one of the things I learned about marriage is my wife and I are completely opposite, and somehow we found each other. I don't feel like we were as like focused on choosing things. We look for some simple things. Like my wife is so incredibly kind, and I was like, wow, she's really kind. I want to be with somebody who is like, just treats everybody like that. That was like the number one, I think, attraction for me, was just her kindness. But there's just so much, like the things that I'm really good at are like her weaknesses and vice versa with mine. And I think that's what marriage is about. It's just like this kind of completion, of like, hey, look, we make a good entity together, but maybe not separately.
Totally. I mean, that's kind of where we started was, so in our course for singles, we call it complementarity. So there's compatibility, and you kind of want to be compatible on certain things, like your values, like your worldview. It helps to be compatible on that, like how you like to spend time. But then you also want to, like you're saying, this complementarity. How do you fit together? Because ultimately, one of the most beautiful and challenging parts of relationships is that they stretch us to move beyond ourselves, to like grow in ways that we wouldn't if we weren't in the relationship, and to become better. And so, I think a lot of times we end up, whether we mean to or not, we end up with somebody who's different than us in the ways that we need. But not everybody is open to like really looking at themselves and saying, oh, maybe this is something I need to work on.
Yeah. When it comes to dating, what are some things that people are doing wrong with dating?
Yeah. So I think, so like in big picture, I would say that there's a lot of over acceleration of different areas of relationships. And I'm not just talking about sex or something. People,
but you are talking about sex and other things. Yeah.
And other things. So I'll give an example of an other thing, because I think a lot of times that doesn't get enough attention, but there's an over acceleration of different areas of relationship, and it causes sort of like the heart to override the head. So people become very attached. And once you become really attached, it creates a false sense of knowing. And then you start giving second chances. You kind of rationalize away massive red flags. You stay too long, all those things. So
you choose somebody that's not good for you, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So over acceleration, that's, hey, you're falling in love or feeling that attachment too fast.
So one way is sex. Sex just has an impact on us.
It causes an attachment.
It just causes. I mean, like we're
biologically
wired right to attach through that mechanism. Okay, so another is how what we call in our courses we define as trust, the construct of trust. So trust is your belief in somebody else. Okay, so try to explain this easily. So it's a belief in someone. So what we do when we get to know someone, and we've been doing this since we were little, this is the foundation of attachment theory, but we start to sketch almost like a mental picture of people in our minds, like a caricature. Okay. So like you have a picture of your wife. If I was like, what do you think she's doing right now? Could you kind of guess? Based on what you know about her, right? But that's not you having the factual information necessarily. It's like you have this representation in your mind of your wife. We have this with everybody, with our kids, with our partners, with everyone. And we highlight some things. Like if you imagine like caricatures of presidents, like Trump would be like, you highlight the crazy hair, like Obama, the big ears, right? So we focus on some and we move others to the background. Okay, here's what you need to know. When we're getting to know somebody in a new relationship, we have these databases that we pull from to construct this picture. So some of what we use to construct it is factual based, like we've sat and talked to them. We really know these things and we've tested it out and all this stuff. But most of it is us getting to know a little bit and then filling in all the blanks from our databases. So if I'm on a date and I meet somebody and they're like, I'm an attorney and I have some weird problem with attorneys. And I'm like, oh, they're narcissistic, right? Like kind of I have some bad association there. All of a sudden, my belief in this person goes way down. Now, if he keeps talking and he's like, oh, but I do most of my time spent doing pro bono work for animal shelters. And I'm like, you're kidding me. I love animals, right? It's like so cliche, right? So all of a sudden my opinion goes way up. My belief in them goes way up. I may have had a 2-minute conversation, and based on those 2 bits of information, I have sketched a complete picture that now I have this really positive belief in this guy. And I'm going to start filling in the blanks with all this positive information. We do this all the time. I think this is one of the most dangerous ways we over accelerate relationships, because then we just assume he does pro bono work. What else does this mean about him? Oh, he's selfless and he's giving and he's got. So we kind of like extrapolate and give ourselves permission then to see them in the best light, even when maybe we see examples of them not doing things.
How do we not do that? How do we not build that caricature?
Well, we're going to always do it. Like it's just part of a human function. We don't need to get into why, because that's like a whole nother episode, but you're going to do it. But if you're aware of it, then you can keep it in check. And that's really all you need to do, is you need to take what you get to know. And as you fill in that picture, you can become aware of it. Oh, this is an ideal for me. Like I'm really liking this person because these things are like on my wish list for a partner. And he or she just checked these boxes. So part of it is being aware. Another part is giving enough time. I mean, you really need to have enough time in a relationship to get to know somebody. So keep checking what you're filling in the gaps with versus what you actually know and have tested out over time. Time tends to reveal the true character of a person. You know, patterns will develop. And like you talked about your wife, like she's so kind to everybody. So it wasn't just she's kind to me. You saw how she generalized that, and that said something powerful about her. So we need to give it enough time to start to observe people in different relationships, different settings, see what they're like when they're angry, all these things, right? To test out that picture over time.
So you're dating advice. Be aware of kind of these false narratives that we build about people, and really look for like, hey, how do we see their true character? Be a little patient in the relationship before we start, giving too much of ourselves emotionally or physically.
All of it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So how can we make ourselves better partners when we are in a relationship?
Oh, that's a good question. I think part of it is having so one of the best things to look for in a partner is the openness to change. And I'm not saying that type of change where it's like, don't try to change me.
Yeah. Don't try to make me not like basketball anymore.
Right. Like this unhealthy change, but like a receptivity to feedback and an openness to work on things. So I think as you're choosing a partner, you want to look for that. If I bring something up, do they take it in? Do they consider it? And then as you're showing up in relationships, ask yourself the same thing. If I'm getting some feedback, am I receptive to this? If it's valid, not, dysfunctional feedback, but am I receptive? Am I willing to work on my stuff? And I think that's a big piece of it. I don't think you need to like have everything worked out in order to get into a relationship. But you need to be willing to take a look at how you're showing up in your relationships. And I think sometimes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like life is ideally this, journey where we're constantly making little changes, little course corrections, and like, hey, look, I'm improving, I'm getting better, I'm not as bad a human as I used to be, and it's people are very like sensitive to like, oh, I should change this, and it's like, no, actually you should, like that would make you better. There's like little character flaws that we all have, and we just need to be willing to accept, hey, I've got this character flaw, how can I like become more patient or whatever, what I mean? There's just a million things that we can all work on. So when I do recognize a character flaw, or like my spouse brings that up and says, hey, you should work on this, like how do I go about that process of like, hey, I'm going to try to change something about me,
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, there's so many different answers because there's a lot of nuance to what you're trying to change potentially, but a lot of times we need new information. So I'm like a big skeptic with spontaneous change, unless there was like some, like, you
Major
almost like
event. Yeah.
lost your life, or like, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly, a major event. So spontaneous change, I think, is, suspect. So you usually need some new information, and you can get that in a variety of ways. You can hop on Instagram. There's lots of people doling out, advice and information there. There's podcasts, there's books, go to therapy. You have to have some motivation. So if your partner says, I think you should change this, but you don't really think that you should, you're not gonna.
Mhm.
And so tap into, why am I doing this? What's this about? How will things be better if I make this change? And it takes doing it over and over again
Mhm.
over time. And I think, that's a tricky part of dating too, is if you ask somebody to make a change, then trying to figure out if it's actually getting made or not. Because people, if you've been impatient for 37 years of your life, and now you're being asked to become more patient, it's going to take you a minute to
Mhm.
learn how to develop that skill. And so offering a little grace period there, but keep kind of coming back to it and practicing that change.
One of the things I look for when I'm trying to decide if I should change something, like, am I hurting somebody else with what I'm
Mhm.
doing?
Mhm.
And is it like rational that that person is being hurt by this? Like, hey, is this like, what am I doing? Is that, actually causing pain to my wife? Am I like doing something that she should rationally? And I'm like, oh, if I'm doing that, then yeah, I should adjust. And if
Yeah.
it's like, well, she shouldn't really be hurt by this.
I was going to say, it's so subjective though.
Yeah, but that's a conversation that you can have and
It
be like, hey,
is.
like, why is this hurting you? Like, this is my, because a lot of times, like, what we do, like, people perceive things differently,
Yes.
and it's like,
Yeah.
should my perception, or like your perception of what I'm thinking, like, hurt you? Like, do I need to
Yes.
change or do you need to change? There's like that
Yeah.
balance of maybe we both need to change.
Well, you're bringing up something really important. So in our committed relationships, obviously that caricature also
Mhm.
exists, and that is a big part of how we perceive things. So like, I'm just going to give an example. You didn't say this about your wife, so she's listening. You never said this, but if
Yeah,
she
yeah,
sees
totally.
you as somebody who is impatient,
Mhm.
and that is what is at the forefront of her picture of you, and one day you kind of like snap, but maybe you have perfectly good reason, she's going to be quicker to kind of like cast you, like sentence you, like, oh, there you go, being
Mhm.
impatient again. Because that is, so the point is that we own, like, we have to be in charge of our pictures of people in our lives. Like, we are responsible for that, not our partners.
Mhm.
And so there are times where we are the ones. So I say it's an individual and a dynamic thing, where we have to say, ooh, I am real, like, I need to readjust that. I need to clean that out, because I am seeing you and jumping to conclusions in this particular way. And it's not very flattering. So,
Sometimes when we talk about our partners, we use the word always.
ugh,
And that's the word I've been like trying to like pull from my vocabulary. You always, and I'm like,
yeah.
no, nobody always does anything. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like, this is how you act. And it's like, no, that's I don't know. I think sometimes we try to build these arguments against people in our head,
We
and we
do.
use that always term, and then it like weakens the argument because that's not true.
Always and never, both should be. I remember even when I was little,
Mhm.
every time, I always, nothing is ever
You
always. It was
never
like
do
this.
this. I'm like, well,
No,
sometimes they
really?
do.
Sometimes you do.
I put my shoes away occasionally.
Exactly. Yeah, and we get to choose where we focus, right? Do we
Hmm.
choose? Do we focus on the one time you did put them away, or do we focus on the other times where you didn't? And so, where you choose to focus is going to absolutely shift how you see your partner.
So, what are just some kind of quick and easy tips on like how people can improve their relationships? There may not be such a thing as a quick and easy tip to improve a relationship, but we can pretend.
I can pretend. All right. Quick and easy is not my thing. So I'll give you
Well,
one
we can
take.
go long. We
No, it's
can take all
okay.
the time, but just what are your tips for improving relationships?
I think like I'm like a big picture person, and then I can get into details. But a big picture tip is, if you're in a committed relationship, is coming together to regularly manage your relationship. So
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in meetings, like regularly scheduled, unless you've gotten so good at it, you just do it automatically. But not a lot of people have, but regularly scheduled times to check in. I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, like, how do you do that? How do you
Yeah.
say, hey, like every Sunday at 7, we're gonna have our little like how am I doing? How are you doing in our relationship? I mean, is that kind of what it looks like or?
Yeah. So
Mhm,
in our couples course, we give a like a format and a how to and what you talk about and everything for these meetings. But yeah, I mean, it's really about how often you need it. So maybe it's every week, maybe it's once
mhm,
a month. You determine that, and yeah, you schedule it. And I think that there's like a lot of residual benefits to these things. So um a lot of times women end up being the people who manage the relationship, like not always, but a lot
mhm,
of times it's the women who will be like, I think we need to talk, or I think need to have a date. And so when you schedule this, it immediately takes that off her plate, which is a huge bonus,
mhm,
because then you're sharing this responsibility. It doesn't make her in charge of the relationship. Two, a lot of times we don't talk about our relationships unless something is wrong, and so we create this sort of fear of having the relationship discussions. But I mean, we manage everything in our life. We manage our schedules. If you have a job, you likely have meetings where you manage
mm,
stuff, you manage your kids' activities. Like, why would we not manage our relationship? It just is
mhm.
crazy that we don't think about it that way. And so um, it's a great way to prevent little vulnerabilities from building up over the years and creating a massive issue down the road.
Yeah, I don't know that I do that with my wife, in a super formal way, but one of the things that I think we did best early on when we had young kids, we just said, "Hey, we're gonna do a weekly date
Yeah.
and get out." And, it allows you to talk and just be like, "Hey, remember you and me? Like,
Yeah.
we
We have
love each other."
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not just, you know, baby butt wipers, we got other jobs,
Totally.
you know?
Baby butt wipers. Yeah, I mean, we can quickly fall out of the know with our partner when we don't keep in touch with each other like that. I
Mhm.
mean, especially after kids, you change a lot. I think, and so it happens little by little, but all of a sudden you can find yourself in your relationship when you don't keep up with one another, looking back, being like, I don't feel like we even really know each other anymore.
Mhm.
So,
So one of the things you mentioned earlier is how sex can have like this attachment it creates with people. And I think it's like an important part of relationships. Like,
mhm.
what tips do you have around people's sex lives to be, improve that or to kind of just be on the same page and make sure there's like happiness there? Because you hear a lot of the dysfunction of like, oh, the husband's mad, they're not having sex enough, and the wife, oh, doesn't want to do it, like that kind of trope.
Yeah. Yeah, this could be a whole episode. So I think the number one thing is you got to talk about your sex life.
Hmm.
Every time I do a series on sex, I am blown away at how uncomfortable people are in their own relationships talking about sex. So you'll have sex, but you won't talk about it. It's
Yeah. Uh-huh.
crazy. And I think that, a lot of times, you know, sex is not separate from the relationship, right? It's part of it. And so if there's other things going on in the relationship, it's inevitably going to affect your sex life. And especially this isn't my like opinion, but even when you look at the research on these things, it's usually going to affect it more for women.
Hmm.
And so talking about it so you can and these meetings will help your sex life because you're going to take care of some of these things regularly. But being able to talk about what's going on with their sex life, understanding desire is really really helpful. So um I don't know how much I want to how much you want me to get into, but
Go for it.
understanding
Whatever
like,
you want.
so you can think of desire as like an on and off switch or a brake and an accelerator. So
Hmm.
things that turn you on hit the accelerator, and things that turn you off hit the brake. And so really like being in the mood, especially for women, is mostly about how do you take your foot off of the brake, and then hitting the accelerator helps, but a lot of times it's the brake that's getting in the way of
So
being
what
really.
is the break? What are the
Yeah.
things that are pushing people on the break for people?
Stress is a
Hmm.
huge one. Stress is a big one. Work demands. I talk a lot about on my account the mental load, which is like that running list of to-dos in your mind.
Hmm.
A lot of these things, body image concerns hit the brake, insecurities. If you're not getting along with your partner or something they said bothered you or upset you, or you're having so all these things are hitting the brake. And so I think when you think about sex, you've got to broaden the scope to include all these other parts of the relationship, and then
Hmm.
also be able to talk about what's hitting the brake, what can I do to help remove some of those things, and what are your turn-ons? There's lots of conversations to have. How do you like to be approached? How do you
Mm-hmm.
like to be told no? How much do you want to have sex? I mean, all of these things are important to talk about.
Yeah, that's there's a lot there.
There's a ton there. There's a ton. And there are a lot of misconceptions about it, I think, about sex. So every
Yeah.
time I do it, I hear from women, tons and tons, like hundreds of DMs. I want more sex than my partner. Nobody ever talks about this. So yeah, there's a lot to say.
Yeah. Well, I don't think my wife's going to be sending you any DMs along that message. You know, she'll be like,
Now
oh
you're
no,
gonna
we
get
get
in
plenty.
trouble.
Yeah.
Is that one of those jokes where she's like, you're not funny?
Might be one of those. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So tell me, like, for yourself, I have like this theory that we're all kind of on our life journey, and everyone is really wants one thing, right? To be happy.
Mhm.
And that everything that they want, they're going after, is just something they want to get happy. So if they want trying to like have a business that becomes really successful, make lots of money, they're like, well, that's how I think I get happiness, or if they're wanting to travel, they're like, hey, I want to be happy. And I think traveling is a way to make me happy. What do you do to find that fulfillment to be happy? So this isn't the science here. This is the
No.
Morgan. How does she find happiness?
I mean, this is a part of it. Like, I really love to teach. I really love to talk about this stuff. I feel like, like that flow state where you sort of get in that kind of zone. I feel like that is one of my most favorite sensations, is just getting into that place. And I can get in that place when I'm teaching or creating. I'm very creative. At least, can I say that? Can I like,
You can say it.
Can I proclaim myself as creative? I feel
if people don't think you're creative, they can go look at your little videos.
Yeah, I don't care. They don't have.
And no, I think you're incredibly creative. Is what I'm saying. Like, there was one that you did where you're like hiding under this blanket, and I can't remember what it was about.
It's cognitive distortions.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just like, wow, like, how does she think of that? So
yeah, that just makes me feel I'm very fulfilled when I'm doing creative things. And also in educating. I really like skiing. So we've been doing more skiing this winter with the kids. They're finally learning. I feel like that is one of the my greatest joys in life, is just creating memories with our kids that just, it's like, those moments where you're like, oh yeah, they're going to remember this. This is a good one. Like, I love that. I think those are times I just feel the most just like joyful, really, in life.
So what do you think it is about teaching that makes you feel that fulfillment, that rush, that happiness?
I actually don't know.
Can I offer a theory?
Yeah, please.
Dr. Will.
Insight on this. Dr. Will.
I think maybe it's that you help people when you do it.
Probably.
I think when we serve and help other people, there's like this natural feeling. It's like, wow, that feels so good, and like those are like the kind of secret things that like bring people happiness when everyone is looking for the material things.
Yes.
It's those kind of things that like, hey, if I'm feeling down today, instead of like, hey, let me go buy myself something to like have that like commercial rush, it's like, what can I do to like help somebody out and feel like that real kind of natural, like, it's like we're like meant to help people out. So we feel this when we help people out, this special feeling,
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
just Dr. Will's thoughts.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think to get like feedback from somebody to say, I've been struggling with this, but something you said helped me think about it a little bit differently, or shift, or implement changes. I mean, that is one of the most ultimate compliments I could ever be given. So.
Yep. And then the other thing you mentioned about making memories with your kids, I feel like too, like if we're looking at the thing that makes us happiness, it's the people that we're around.
Yeah.
Like, my wife has more control over my happiness, I feel like, in a lot of ways than I do. Cause like I react on what other people are doing. And like, I get more satisfaction from like spending time with my kids than I do like spending time by myself, and I same thing about like being with my wife and doing stuff with my wife. Like, that's where the happiness lies. And so like those most important relationships, I think, are where I want to invest my time. And hey, I can be happiest when I'm doing, if you think about Valentine's Day, a lot of times like we have these expectations of, oh, I got to go out to this nice dinner and do this stuff. Like we had a dinner at home and then went to my daughter's basketball game. which is like, for some people, they're like, well, he's the worst husband ever. It's like, this is what we had to do. This is our family. Like, and we
Yeah.
love spending time together,
Yeah. We went and saw Spider-Man. So
Did ya?
yeah, I feel like a lot of our conversations, like we keep kind of like coming full circle, which is that, our relationships really do shape so much of our lived experience day to day. And this is why they are so important to choose well and to manage them well, because they affect our experience of life. It's a big deal.
So I have you in my Pillow Cube feed. I see your content all the time, and I'm always like, maybe I should try that. That's a good idea. I should do that. And I just love kind of what you're doing. So I wanted to have you on to kind of like introduce you to some of our Pillow Cube family and audience. And, so thanks for the relationship dating advice. I do have a few questions for you that are kind of sillier.
Oh, okay.
Before we let you go. But what do you think of the movie Hitch?
Oh my gosh, I haven't watched that in so long.
It's like the relationship expert. He's
I
like
know,
the
where he like
TV version
he
of
has
you.
that allergic reaction.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I haven't watched it in so long, but I know that I liked the movie.
It was a funny
Yeah,
movie.
it's a funny movie. Well, I
It was
love
an
movies.
interesting movie because I think he started out as being like, how can you make this relationship work? And kind of a like taking advantage of people to make it work versus like,
Yeah.
how can you make it work at the end of the movie to like find real happiness? Not
Yeah.
just like, oh, like I'm one person taking advantage of another, but how can you like have like a real partnership?
Like you learn to be a bit, I know, I'm like, crap, I don't remember the specifics of the movie, but
I felt like it
learn
was
to
Vayner
have
at the
more
beginning.
depth. Yeah.
Yeah.
More depth. I mean, I probably haven't seen that.
It needs to be like your movie, man.
Okay, well, I'll just watch it. I don't have anything going on tonight. I'll watch it.
Okay, what's a relationship pet peeve that you have? When people do this in a relationship, you're like, this is the worst.
In my own or in general?
No, it doesn't have to be about your husband. Just in general. You see a lot of relationships, so I'm sure.
I just wanted to come up with something more clever than what I'm thinking. But I have no clever ideas. But defensiveness really drives me crazy. I cannot. There's this thing that a lot of people do when they get defensive and they shift the blame.
It's not my fault. It's your fault.
Yes. Or I think about like our son is 6, and so we're working on this. So this is like, this is developmentally normal, but adults do this where you'll be like, hey, I need you to put my well, you didn't get him out for me, or you didn't do, you did. And that is, I've worked with couples where one of the partners does that, and it just locks everything up, and it's incredibly frustrating.
There's something really awesome about like ownership of your mistakes and where you can like move past it. And like, if you own a mistake, like your partner can only hold you accountable for that for so long, right? It's like, oh, you're right. I messed up. Like, I'm so sorry. And then you can like move forward. And if you like deny, you're constantly like having to be like on trial for that same thing.
Exactly. And I know a lot of times there are deeper reasons, right? Like somebody cannot confront their taking responsibility, but it's very frustrating. Difficult to be with a partner like that.
Okay. So if your husband's paying attention,
no,
don't be.
He's gotten really good at we have gotten really good at navigating those conversations.
Yeah. What's your favorite rom-com? I know these are questions that you're not prepared for. Nobody else is asking you.
Well, this is just like you're hitting on something that's a really weak point for me.
Movies?
Which is no. I love movies, but which is like no, like details. Like I don't like. I'm a big picture. I'm like, oh, what's the name of that? I really love the movie Love Actually. That's probably one of my favorites.
Yep.
Yeah, I do love that one.
I'm a Princess Bride guy.
Oh, I love Princess Bride. Yeah, that's such a good
Princess Bride is just like every word of that movie I feel like is perfect.
It was like oh man. I love that movie.
Yep. But in general, I hate rom-coms. But my wife is like,
watched one
that's the only movie that she'll ever want to watch.
Really?
Yeah. And
what do you watch?
Anything.
Anything.
I mean,
anything but what my wife.
Well, here's the thing. I've watched so many that I'm like, okay, it's my turn. This doesn't need to be like you healing our marriage movie problems, but yeah. I watch a lot more
My
movies
turn.
with my son now. So,
That's fun though.
okay. What TV show character do you most relate to?
Oh gosh, this is like
Oh
like
man,
lamest person. Okay, let me think. Like I'm watching the show 1883 right now. Like I'm like, I don't remember what I
is there
watched
nobody?
last week. This is like this chick living on the prairie, like Mary's in Native American. I'm like, no, she doesn't fit. I don't even see, now I'm feeling really lame.
I think you're awesome, so you don't have to worry
I
about being lame.
appreciate
You're doing great
I
stuff.
really, really like TV, but I don't even think it is like where I spend my mindless time. So I check out, I don't analyze it. Talk to my dad about analyzing shows. He'll give you a dissertation on it, but like I just it's how I unwind. So I don't even know.
So I watch Parks and Rec a lot. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I love that show.
Okay, so like I was trying to think about this question for myself, like who do I identify with? Because it is in a lot of ways a hard question to like say, hey, that person reminds me of me. And it's easy to be like, oh, I see all the best characters or best qualities in that character, and it reminds me of me. So I thought, what are the worst qualities about me that remind me of somebody? And then, do you know Tom Haverford?
Yes. Yes.
So Tom, I feel like this character is like, he wants to be cool. He wants to be liked. He wants to have fun. He's like, he's always trying all these dumb things to like hit that, and like, there's this part of me that I'm like, there's like a part of me that's kind of like that. I was like, I want to be like, oh, be the life of the party. And like, oh, isn't this so great? So Tom,
funny.
in all the worst ways, Tom, I
like
try
that
to
you
be,
looked at it from that perspective.
well, like, it's really important to me to like own my like negative characteristics and own, like, if I foul somebody in a basketball game, I'm not trying to not, I'm like, yeah, I fouled them. It's okay. Like, move on, next play, I'm trying to be a better version of Tom. And I actually like his
that.
like
I
development
like Tom,
throughout the
yeah.
show. He like
Yeah.
becomes this like less, like, he's no substance at the beginning. He's all like vain. And then he kind of like learns to like value the real things in relationships. And yeah, try to value the real things.
I love that. All right, now I'm like digging deep here. Do you know the show New Girl?
Yeah.
So Jessie, I feel like, I'm not saying I present to the world like her, but I think like on the inside, I feel like her sometimes.
What
like,
about her?
She's like a little, like she's like she always means well, but she's kind of misunderstood sometimes, and she's like awkward a little bit, or is always kind of like fumbling through some things. And I think that it's something that I've like forced myself to confront. But I think for a lot of my life, I felt like that and I presented to the world maybe a little bit more like that. But I think sometimes I can still feel like her.
Do you consider yourself awkward? Is that what you're saying?
I think I have moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just push
we all
through
do.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Or just like that like, it's almost like a like an intense self-awareness where you're like, what, that feeling, like, what do I do with my hands? Like that type of thing. I feel like that's something I've had to learn to manage over the years. And she represents that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Our minds are pretty interesting because we think sometimes, I feel like, too much, like,
yeah.
We like beat ourselves up. We're just constantly thinking about, oh man, why am I doing this? Anyway.
It's just like an art of turning it off sometimes. That's like a skill. I don't know how to
It's actually one of the things I'm best at. Just like not thinking about stuff that doesn't matter. I'm like, whatever. We'll move on.
It just comes out in your dreams.
Yeah, my dreams. I do it all in my dreams. I think about going to prom. And so, well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Love what you're doing. And, if people have some need for relationship advice, check her out on Instagram. It's My Love Thinks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. My Love Thinks. So
thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
No problem. Okay. Thanks.